Welcome to Continuing Education, developing objectives for your wellness program, fine-tuning for your intentions and direction. The agenda for this module includes a definition of what an objective is, a criteria for a good objective, a set of prioritized program goals, and examples of companion program objectives and metrics for all the goals, and then some process considerations, and then a summary of key points. Our definition of objective comes from the business literature and something called the Business Dictionary, and it reads a specific result that a person or a system aims to achieve within a time frame and with available resources. In general, objectives are more specific and easier to measure than goals. Objectives are basic tools that underlie all planning and strategic activities. They serve as the basis for creating policy and evaluating performance. Some examples of business objectives include minimizing expenses, expanding internationally, or making a profit. So that's our context for what we'll be looking at as a program objective. The criteria for a good program objective includes a time limited within a 1-year period. So I would suggest and recommend that you think about your objectives as annual objectives and that you modify those each year. They should be easily measurable. They should have a slight stretch involved in them, meaning that you expect to achieve them, but it will require a small amount of stretch. They usually need to be linked to a goal. They're oftentimes more tactical, where our goals are more strategic. The mixture of types of activities, so it may be an outcome, it may be a program operational issue, it may be a introduction of a new program component, but a mix of different types of objectives. Something for major stakeholders, so that if you have major stakeholders you're responding to, that you put in an objective which tends to address an issue that they are concerned about or have some utility in accomplishing. A set of prioritized program goals are, for instance, the first priority is to improve employee health, second priority to reduce the growth of health costs, third priority is to reduce health risk, fourth priority might be to save money for the employer, fifth priority is to enhance employee productivity, sixth priority might be to satisfy the employee needs. Seventh priority is to improve recruitment and retention. And the eighth priority is to change organizational culture. Now, for each of those goals, let's look at a possible objective and a metric. So our first priority goal is to improve employee health. Our objective might be stated as to have a minimum of 10% more employees indicate that their health is excellent or good in a cohort of HRA completers, that's Health Risk Assessment completers, by December 31st, 2018. So it's time limited. It would be within an annual period of time, a year period of time, and in this particular case, we're looking at a minimum of 10% or more of employees indicating that their health is excellent. The metric for this might be the number of employees indicating that their health is excellent or good in 2017, expressed as a percentage and then compared with the annual response for the cohort, the same cohort in 2018. So here it allows us to talk about a minimum of 10% improvement. We have a baseline, which is in 2017, and then we're looking at it again in 2018. Second priority goal is to reduce the growth rate of health costs. Our objective may be phrased as to reduce by a minimum of 25% the expected annual rate of growth in employee per capita health benefit costs from 2018 to 2019. So our base year is 2018. We're then looking at 2019 as the year when this measurement would be taken. The 25% can be 25% of expected, and usually in the process of making estimates of what the premium needs to be to support and purchase health care for a known population, we can generally look at the rate of growth expected in our annual per capita costs. And that is what we can use to then look at a 25% reduction. For instance, if you expect a 12% increase in the per capita employee benefit cost from one year to the next, if you reduce that down to 9, that would be a 25% reduction. The metric in this case would be the total health plan annual cost divided by the number of covered employees for 2018 and then compared to the same calculation for the 2019 year expressed as a percentage of the expected. So that would be how you would go about getting this particular metric to evaluate this particular objective. Third priority goal is to reduce employee health risk, and the objective may be stated as to improve at least 5 health risk factors. You can make choices of 3 or 5 or 8, however many you want to look at, among a cohort of employee HRA completers by December 31st, 2019. So the issue here has to do with how many of the health risk factors indicated in the health risk assessment or well-being assessment would in fact be improved during this time period. The metric would be for each of the health risk factors examined consistently from 2018 to 2019 among a consistent cohort, determine those that are improved and count them. So that's what you would be doing with this particular goal and this particular objective. The fourth priority goal is to save money for the employer. The objective may be to examine the first-year economic return of our employee wellness program by measuring the estimated savings from health plan costs, sick leave absenteeism, workers' compensation, and presenteeism for 2018 by May 1st of 2019. So this extends beyond a year period, but it basically covers the amount of time that would be under a year. So measurement and evaluation can proceed after the year period. The metric in this case would be for each of the economic variables to be examined during the baseline amounts, determine the baseline amounts for 2017 and compare each with the expected amounts and then summarize those amounts and percentages. So that's what you would be doing in this particular case to identify the actual economic return in dollars. The fifth goal is to enhance employee productivity. Our objective may be framed as follows: to have a minimum of 40% of employees responding positively to a question in an annual program evaluation survey that the wellness program has helped them be more productive at work by December 31st, 2018. So the idea with this particular objective is that you are using a Likert scale where there's a strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. The positively would essentially say agree or strongly agree. That would be the percentage of all respondents indicating in response to a question like, the wellness program has helped me be more productive at work, period. Then I'm taking the agrees and essentially reporting them out. And this one basically says at least a minimum of 40% of employees responding agree or strongly agree to this particular question in a program evaluation survey. The metric here is for the cohort that completes the annual program evaluation survey in 2018, the number of respondents that respond positively to a question about the wellness program's impact on their work productivity. So if you go back to the level 1 course in your workbook, there's a tool in the back called an annual employee program survey. It's called the APES survey. And that survey contains a number of questions which are phrased around this particular issue. So that would be the question set that you'd be using to in fact determine whether this objective and this goal were in fact met. Now with the sixth goal, to satisfy employee needs, our objective may be structured like this: to have respondents to a question in an annual program evaluation survey report a satisfaction score with the employee wellness program that averages a minimum of 8.0 on a 10-point scale, where 1 is poor and 10 is excellent, by December 31st, 2018. So that's the issue where we're looking at the average score on the satisfaction scale that's used in an employee evaluation instrument. The metric might be the percent of respondents of eligibles completing the annual program evaluation survey in 2018 that report a satisfaction score on a 1 to 10 scale expressed as an average to 1 decimal place reporting, which means it might be a 9.2 or an 8.6 or an 8.0, but that's a 1 decimal place report. So that would be the metric that would enable me to evaluate this objective and to then indicate that I'm meeting this particular goal. The seventh prioritized goal is to improve recruitment and retention, and to have the objective could be stated as follows: to have at least 15% of respondents to a question in an annual program evaluation survey indicate that they strongly agree or agree to the statement, "I believe that our employee wellness program has improved the recruitment of new employees and the retention of existing employees," by December 31st, 2018. So that question set and then measuring the percentage of respondents who strongly agree or agree with that statement is how I would look at this particular evaluation objective. And the metric would be the percent of respondents that indicate strongly agree or agree to the recruitment and retention statement in the annual program evaluation survey. You'll notice in this particular approach we actually said strongly agree and agree. That's a Likert scale. In the previous one, we simply said respond positively to a question that has to do with the following issue. So it's just a different way of structuring the objectives and the metrics around how we approach this particular goal of our wellness program. The eighth goal that's prioritized is to improve employee health. So we may in fact have a goal that says to improve at least 5 health risk factors among a cohort of employee HRA completers by December 31st, 2018. So we in fact have again set 5 risk factors as our threshold. We may have 3, we may have 5, may have 8, may have 10, whatever number we choose. And then the metric would be the average improvement in each health risk factor for the cohort. Now the cohort means I've got HRA data on these risk factors for this individual for 2017. And I'm then again looking in 2018 at what has happened in relation to those specific risk factors. And then though that cohort has completed all pre and post health measures in both 2017 and 2018. So that would be the metric I would use again to evaluate this objective and to respond to this particular goal. The ninth prioritized goal is to change organizational culture. So our objective might be to make a minimum of 5 human resources and employee benefit or service policy changes that explicitly support wellness by December 31st, 2018. So that's my objective, and that's really more of an integrated programming objective. I'm attempting to take wellness and affect more of my organizational culture by having it addressed by more of the policy issues and policy statements that the employer is using. The metric here might be the actual count of separate policy changes for HR and employee benefit services that explicitly support wellness by a particular date. And that date then allows the metric to really be applied to a specific year of activity. So again, this is how my metric would enable me to look at the objective, which is then related back to my goal. I may have other objectives I may choose to put in place that might have to do with organizational culture. An example might be I might have an objective of doing a formal or explicit normative systems change process where I have employees working together to look at changing the norms around wellness in our organization. So that would be another objective, and that could then actually be structured around a metric. So lots of different ways of getting to our goals. We're simply looking at some options around the shape and structure of objectives, and then a corresponding metric in order to measure that objective during the year period of programming. Now, process considerations, and these are some suggestions as to how you might use objectives or develop them to get the most utility out of them. Every wellness program, we believe, should have 5 to 8 measurable, time-limited, slight stretch objectives each year. And that developing an initial set of program objectives for new programs usually occurs after you've had a formal process where you've clarified and perhaps prioritized your goals. The objectives that you develop around your program should include a balance of activity, achievements, important administrative milestones, and intermediate results, and some should reflect major goals. And they also should potentially be of value or perceived as value by some of your major stakeholders. So those, again, are related back to our concept around how we structure goals and then how we set objectives. You usually want to revise your 5 to 8 annual program objectives at a regular time each year. That's usually around the budget preparation time. And that's oftentimes when you're working on looking at how much of your objectives you've been able to accomplish. So the idea that your annual program objectives are revised each year, 1 or 2 may be dropped, 1 or 2 may be new, and then the rest may be revised given different program emphases or different expectations for how you're working on those objectives. You then can report out your objectives each year as fully met, partially met, or not met. You can also address the percentage that they have been met if you have a measurement parameter to actually make that determination from. So these are some process considerations around your program objectives. More examples of program objectives might be to train 14 employees as site wellness coordinators or ambassadors by December 31st, 2018. Another example might be to introduce an e-health portal to all employees and spouses by November 1st, 2018, and that's a program operational objective. To have a minimum of 35% of employees participate in a biometric screening opportunity, that's a participation objective. And the next one is to establish an employee wellness advisory committee by September 1st, 2018, and that would be essentially a program operation or program management objective. So those are the different types that we've seen so far. The training would be number 1 would essentially be a participation related kind of objective. 5 is to roll out a wellness incentive program that requires completion of an HRA by November 1st, 2018. So that again would be program operational objective. To visit 4 other local employers and review their employee wellness efforts by December 31st, 2018. Particularly if I'm going into a redesign or choosing a new strategy for my program, moving from maybe traditional to results driven or from feel good to traditional. That would be a example of something that I might use to help me do and follow through on that visiting and looking at other programs. And 7, to obtain a budget commitment for a wellness program in 2019 from headquarters by June 1st, 2018. So that may be designed for me to use as leverage so that I can in fact get some help or get some budget resources for the program as part of my objectives. So it gives me, in a sense, an excuse to be looking and leveraging certain activities out of my corporation or my entity. And finally, to secure a wellness vendor, perhaps an integrated vendor, or a vendor that can be a lead vendor by December 31st, 2018 in terms of a program management kind of objective. So again, here are a number of different kinds of objectives, program objectives that can be used in a wellness program. Summary of key points. First of all, many worksite wellness programs suffer from a lack of program objectives or poorly developed objectives. Secondly, program objectives are different than program goals. So as we characterize them, the objectives are usually for an annual period of time. They're usually time limited, measurable. I know what to measure because of the way they're structured. They're a slight stretch. They may in fact be something that has a balance of focus. So they're not all loaded up on one area, but they usually cover a variety of areas. Ideally, program objectives should be related to your program goals. So there needs to be some hierarchical relationship. Now, you don't have to adhere to that in a mechanistic way. So you can have goals, but you want to have some reasons why you have particular goals. And that's oftentimes it's accountability for yourself and for others. It's accountability for management so that they, in fact, allow you to work on something that they have agreed you should work on. So there's lots of different reasons as to why you want certain issues emphasized. Also, if you have goals that are not being addressed, then you probably need to think about some objectives for those goals. Also, high priority program goals at a minimum should have corresponding program objectives. So if we had 9 different priority goals, we would definitely want some objectives for the first 4 or 5. Then I can basically say I am following the lead my objectives, prioritized objectives, give me in implementing or executing the program. Program objectives help guide program activities and help provide structure to the program evaluation process. So they help guide my activities, but they're also providing some structure to how I evaluate my program activities. Program objectives help structure the accountability for the program. Program objectives tend to be more tactical than program goals, which are usually the strategic elements in program planning and implementation. So I oftentimes want to use my goals as the place to address strategic issues, and then take the objectives and move into tactical responses to those strategic goals. A good set of program objectives can provide an invaluable help to keep a wellness program on target with management expectations. This is how you essentially can build in a self-aligning process, a self-correcting process, to make sure that your efforts in wellness are in line and aligned with management expectations and desires. And finally, use your objectives to make visible those issues that need more visibility with management and/or employees. So you want to pick your objectives around issues that you want more visibility on. And that oftentimes can be to help leverage things or to help move things along. So in summary, these are some of the key points associated with this particular continuing education module. Now let's look at some key questions, and those questions are: what if management is not serious about wellness? Why take the risk of underperforming by developing program objectives? I think it's a legitimate question, but my response would be that you need to hold management accountable just as they need to hold you accountable. So if they're essentially telling you, do a wellness program, but we're not going to give you any money, and then you can use the objectives you have to come back to them and say, if you would like me to accomplish this, I'm going to need more resources or more support. Secondly, in answer to this question, you may want to leverage for some more future improvements in your program. So that's a way of doing it. And then I believe the third reason is you want to do this as insurance for yourself. So insurance insures you against the risk that they come back to you and say, well, you didn't do a very good job. Well, if you can use your objectives to basically say, I had this objective, it required this much in the way of resources and support, you didn't give it to me. So it wasn't my fault. So it's insurance for you as an individual program manager. Second question is, how should program objectives be developed? And I think the best way to develop them is to take a good, heavy, strong look at your goals, identify your objectives, and set 5 to 8 of those each year, modify them and update them, add some, subtract some, and then draft them and then have them ratified. And ratified just simply means, here are my program objectives, senior management group, please ratify these. Please tell me that these are appropriate for us to and for me to undertake. The third question is, which comes first, goals or objectives? And the answer is goals. So I want to know what my prioritized goals are from senior management and or whatever group has been tasked with the wellness process if my senior management doesn't want to weigh in on prioritization. And then I want to use those goals to develop objectives. Fourth question is, how would you suggest reporting on program objectives? And I think we touched on that briefly in the module, but I would report each objective as either fully met, partially met, or not undertaken. And then list the reasons. I can also report what proportion of them were completed if I've set up my objectives so that we can deal with the quantitative measurement of whatever it was. So I can give them a percent completed as part of that reporting process as well. So that's the approach that I have used to advantage in terms of reporting back on objectives. You can do that in a table, and then you can indicate whether they're fully, partially, or not met, or percent met, and then you can identify the reasons for that in a column in a table. So it allows you to report on your objectives in fairly short order and fairly efficiently. Now you've completed this module, go ahead and take the quiz.